Hello everyone, welcome to another lesson. Today we are going to talk about switch function. So the switch statement is a control structure used in C++ to simplify decision making when dealing with multiple conditions. So it is an efficient and readable alternative to using multiple if-else statements, especially when we have several potential outcomes. So it helps us to have a more organized code and more clearly handling outputs when we have like several of them. So let's start with an example. Here we used if-else conditions. We say, okay, we initialize the integer called day with the value of 3. Then we say if day equals 1, print Monday. If it equals 2, print Tuesday, etc. until the end, until if day equals 7, print Sunday. And else invalid input. So all of them, the first one is if, the other ones are else if until the end. If neither of the above conditions are correct, just print invalid day. So let's try this code and see how it works. So it is printing Wednesday because we mentioned the day equals 3, then 3 here, and we are printing the Wednesday. But as you can see here, we're checking many conditions, and it's really hard to go through all these lines because there are many conditions to be checked. Instead of doing this, we can use switch condition. But let's first discuss how switch condition structure would be. So instead of saying if, we write switch, and then we write down the variable in the parentheses. Then we open the bracket, and when we open the bracket, we check the case with the first condition, again case, second condition, case with the third condition, and then as a default it is exactly working like else. So if neither of the above mentioned cases were there, we use the default. When we write down the case, we write down the conditions, we put semicolon, and we go to the next line, and we execute the code whatever we want, and then we must write down break. So the program exit when enters this statement after executing whatever it needs to execute, it breaks. Otherwise it also goes for the next case, and it also goes for the next case. So it is important for us to manually break it. So let's do the example. It would be more clear how it works. So let me uncomment these lines, and then we run the code that we have here. So already when looking at this code and comparing it with this code, you see that even it looks nicer. There are some spaces between them, and you can read it much easier. So we say the input is day, and it is set to 3, and instead of if, we write down switch and we put the day. So the day is our variable that we are trying to check some conditions over this variable. Then instead of having multiple if else if conditions, we are just mentioning case, 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 case until the end. So if case, instead of saying if day equals 1, we say case 1. It means if day equals 1. But instead of writing all of those things, we say case 1, case 2, case 3. It means that when our case, which is day here, equals 1, equals 2, equals 3. But we don't write those things. This is why it makes the program much easier. And then we have the semicolon, we go to next line, and we say, okay, if you enter this condition, print Monday. If you enter this condition, print Tuesday, etc. until the end. And we need to remember, we don't have to forget this break. we need to write down the break at the end of each case. And there is, instead of having the else after having all of these cases, we have a default here saying that if neither of the above things happened, if none of them were true, so you just simply print out invalid day number. So let's try and see how it works. It is printing again Wednesday. So it's much straightforward, and it is more readable as compared to using if conditions. So when we have a lot of conditions to be checked, it's easier to use a switch statement. So as you see here in this course, I'm giving you different tools and I'm teaching you different tools that are used in C++. And based on what you want to do, based on the application of your code, you need to wisely choose these tools. So you can use if conditions until forever and you can use it always, but is it efficient? No. Probably there are some cases that you need to write it with boolean flags, you need to write it with switch statement, etc. So these are only toolboxes that I'm offering, and depending on your application, you need to first clearly think about all of these tools and see use how using these tools and when using these tools would be beneficial for you to write a more concise and efficient code.